Welcome to WY20. I'm your host, Carl Figueiredo, and today we're joined with Madeline Leigh. She's an award-winning non-union costume designer who I've had the pleasure of working with countless times, and might I just say, you're one of the favorites that I get to work with. I have to say that about everyone, but truly, you're one of the favorites.
Thank you, as are you for me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So let's start off by, why don't you tell us, me, the listeners, a little bit about what is costume designing? What does it entail?
Yeah, costume designing is sort of the act of helping to figure out, in my mind, who a character is and how they relate to the world and the other people there, and just sort of bringing that character more to the forefront in a visual way, whereas the actor, as well, is visual, of course, but sort of helping to sell who they're trying to be, you know?
Okay, and how do you do that? So, like, when I hear design, do you create every outfit, or is it's the creation of pulling the outfit together? What's sort of your process?
It's a bit of both. It depends on the show, obviously, as with everything. But most of the time, I'd say it is more, for at least the shows that I've gotten to work on, styling. So, like, pulling together different things that you find around, whether it be at thrift stores or just shopping in the malls or ordering online. The shows that I really do love are when you get to, like, fully design and you get to, like, bring something from start to finish, whether you're, like, fully sewing something or just, like, altering things to make it look a certain way, or doing breakdown. Those are the ones I really like to do.
So which act do you prefer the most? Do you like creating the outfit from fabrics, or do you prefer to do the altering of an outfit or just pulling it together? Which is your favorite out of those three?
It's a hard question. I think I do love making them from scratch when you get to do it from the start to finish. I think that's a really fun time and you have so much control, which
For
is
sure.
nice.
Yeah, you get to add your own little artistic flair to it. How do you, speaking of artistic flair, how do you control that when you have to when, let's say the production doesn't have enough money and they don't have enough time to give you to be able to create your own outfit from scratch? How do you add your artistic flair to designs that you have to just pull from the thrift store?
Yeah, it can be tough sometimes because, like, I've worked on a lot of very low budget productions, and a lot of time you don't have enough time, you don't have enough money. That's kind of how it goes. But kind of just adding little things that you can, like pins or patches, or if you can just add a little breakdown to add like some wear and tear to something, give it like its own little story, you know? Um, or even just, like, the act of how you put it together with other things is in itself, like, part of the creativity in my mind.
Very cool. So when you start a project, what do you initially do? So you got sent a script, the director's given you their little synopsis of the story, and you're gung-ho to do it. What's the first thing you do?
First thing is definitely script breakdown. So going through, writing out, like, every character, every, like, if there's, like, mentioned background, anything like that. And then checking because, like, some scripts will have a mention of a specific clothing item, like it'll be like a red jacket or something like that. Making note of that to talk to the directors, producers, if they actually want that, because a lot of the time something will be in the script, but they won't be married to it, you know? If you have, like, a better idea or something, they'll go for that. And just kind of getting the vibe for a character, writing down, like, their age, their background, and getting to know who they are.
Yeah. And do you initially do, I guess, a prelim of your characters, or do you wait until the director gives it to you? How does that sort of work, your relationship with the director as a costume designer, to get more character info?
It definitely depends on the director a lot, because some directors will come in and they have a very strong vision of who this person is,
Yeah.
clothing wise. And some directors don't want anything to do with clothing. They're like, I don't know anything about this. You just do what you got to do.
Definitely. No, that's me as an AD. I'm like, you tell me how long you need and I'll do it. But if you say it's going to take me 30 hours to sew this arm back on, I'm like, it probably takes 30 hours.
Oh, that's one of the things I love about you, Carl, is that you'll like, I'll be like, can I have this much time? And you're like, okay.
We can try.
We can try.
What type of directors do you prefer working with in that case? Do you prefer the ones that are like, I know exactly what I want, this is what I want you to do for me? Or do you prefer the ones that are like, look, no idea, I don't even know what a costume is?
I like somewhere in the middle, because I like coming in and they know who they are and they have like a bit of an idea.
Yeah.
But I do like having the creativity of being able to be like, well, what if we went in this direction? Or what if we went with like this style a little more? Just to feel like you have a bit more control and creativity, because it can be a little stifling sometimes when you come in and the director's like, I want him to be wearing this pants, this shirt, this jacket. And it's like, well, okay, I guess I'm just here to, shop.
And I want you to do it all for $20.
Yeah.
Retro, vintage, the works.
Retro, vintage, breakdown, multiples. You got $20.
Perfect. Easy. You know what? Not a miracle worker.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about, so in the very early stages, you've done your breakdown, you know what you're sort of looking at, you've done your meeting with the director and he's started to lock in what you need. How important, for a non-union standpoint, is a costume fitting and costume tests?
Very important. With any production, costume fitting is so, so important. It's the worst when you are unable to do a fitting and you're like on the day, like, this doesn't fit or this doesn't look good. It can be tough, especially with like when you're doing indie productions. A lot of time I'm using my house as the fitting room. And I've got 3 roommates. It's like, I've got ferrets. I've got all this stuff going on. And it's like, this feels like it's not super professional looking. I've got a painting of a crying clown on the wall. But
really sets the tone.
Yeah. I mean, it tells them who I am, I guess, right away. But definitely so important. Costume tests to me aren't as important on like a smaller, like non-union indie production. If it's like something that camera needs to see, like we just did a show and there was a pretty sparkly costume at one point. And so it's nice to do like tests on those just to make sure it's not going to be an issue for camera. And it is nice to see them fully how they're going to be and make sure it fits the character and everything. But I think you can get a pretty good idea in visualization in a fitting. Yeah. So it's not the end of the world if you can't do a full like makeup, hair, costume test.
Definitely. And so you mentioned that we predominantly use the fitting to get the right sizes on the character. Is there anything else that you look out for when you're doing a costume fitting?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of just making sure it works. Like sometimes you don't get the headshots for actors. I love getting the headshots because, sometimes the colors you pick might not go with their hair, their skin tone, and you want to make sure definitely that everything is working out and looking good. And you never really know how a cut of an outfit is going to fit someone until it's on their body, because everyone's body is different. Like they can give you their measurements, but everyone's going to fit stuff differently. Even if they have the same measurements, it's going to look different on them,
Gotcha.
Yeah, and just also comfort is one thing. Depending on the actor, you want to make sure they're comfortable in what they're wearing. Like skirts not too short, tops not too low cut. If they're stunts, you want to make sure they have enough room for padding, that they can move properly, because that's like the most important part of their job. and make sure that it's working for them as well as for you.
So you mentioned if there's stunts. How do you usually find out if there's stunts? Would that be something that goes into your breakdown? Do you expect someone to tell you that there's going to be stunts and who it's with?
Usually you can tell from the script if someone's like getting hit by a car or something like that. You're like, I assume the actor's not going to be doing this.
Yeah.
But usually I do also rely on the director or first AD to let me know that there is going to be stunts.
Yeah.
So that I can get started on that, know that I'm going to need doubles, to budget that, and just mentally prepare.
Yes. That they're probably going to ruin the outfit.
Yes.
No. Who is the person who goes out and gets the measurements from the cast?
Most of the time it's me on indies. Just because a lot of the time I am working alone.
Yeah.
But if I'm lucky enough to have an assistant, who is often Lucy, who's wonderful, I have been getting them to do it. And normally, like on a bigger show, it is the assistant costume designer who will get the measurements, and be that sort of first point of contact with the actors.
Got you. And you mentioned to me you work in the union world as well, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So in your experience, what's the large difference for a costume designer in your eyes from the union side of things to the non-union?
It's a tough question. There's a lot of differences and similarities. I mean, one of the most obvious is definitely money.
Yes.
You definitely have so much more money on a union show, and often more time for preparing things. I did like one union show where we were doing one scene, and we had, I think, 2 or 3 weeks of prep, and it was like one actor and maybe 10 BG, and we had all that time, and it was so nice to just be able to think about things. Whereas on a non-union, usually you have, like, sometimes you don't get cast until like a couple days before shooting.
Yes.
So it's very, very go, go, go. And that's not to say that every union show is like that. I'm sure there are some that you get cast last minute. But I have found that it's nicer to have that prep time.
Yes.
And the money to not make mistakes, but if things go wrong, to fix it.
Definitely. So is that something that happens a lot in the non-union world? Like I remember on our show, we got blood on one of your costumes, and there was like, okay, now we need to fix this because blood can't go on this costume.
Yeah. Like if that had been a union show, I think we would have had money for. I mean, because on that show we had a double for the jacket. Actually, for another scene that didn't end up happening, but on a union show, I think we probably would have had like 4 doubles on that jacket. Right. So we could have just switched it over. Whereas on this one, we'd already taken apart the other jacket for the other scene. So it was like a bit of a panic trying to get that blood out. So just having that ability to be more prepared for things to go wrong.
Definitely. Definitely. So how do you... On a non-union set, how would you try to structure it so you minimize the most amount of things happening? Or are you like always prepared that, hey, they told us no blood will go onto this, but I can't trust these people?
Yeah. Sounds bad, but never trust anyone.
Yeah.
Just like always be prepared for the worst.
Yeah.
If you can have doubles, have doubles. Always have cleaning supplies on standby, sewing kits on standby. Always take things with a grain of salt, because a lot of the times you'll read a script and you'll be like, oh, we need doubles, or is this thing going to happen? Are we really going to get this dirty? And in pre-production, you'll be told by the director or producer, no, it's not going to happen. Don't worry about it. And you get to the day and they're like, but what if we actually did do this?
Yeah.
So it's nice to, even when they say it's not going to happen, just be prepared for it to happen.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so preparation is key.
Yes.
And making sure that everyone's thinking that everyone will lie to you is also pretty key in the costumer's eyes.
Yes.
So how does your stuff usually get to set? You mentioned you're a one-man band most of the time. How do you get all the costumes to set? What is your process of actually like going from your home to just being there in your setup? Do you bring everything? Is production meant to?
On all the indies I've worked on, I bring everything usually. A few have offered me like they'll rent a truck for set deck, and sometimes they'll be like, "Oh, we have room if you need to put some stuff in."
Yeah.
But most of the time I kind of like to do it myself. It can be a little tough. I drive a Jeep. It's very compact and small, and fitting a rack in that is a bit of a puzzle. But I make it work.
Nice.
Yeah, it's nice to have that control of bringing it with you. Because I try, if say we're not shooting a character on a day, and if it's not a walk away and I can't leave stuff there, I'm trying not to bring every costume from the show, you know?
Definitely.
So I like having the control of being able to leave something at home and just come back to it at the end of the day.
Have you ever been in a situation that you left one of the items and needed it there that day?
Yeah.
What happens in that situation? Would you just go up and tell someone, or would you be like, "Hey, I need to leave for like 20 minutes"?
Depends on the thing, because a lot of the time it comes back to the never trust anybody.
Yeah.
I'll be like, "Hey, do we need this?" And they'll be like, "No, no, no, no." And then they'll be like, "Actually, we have time now. What if we shot this?"
Yeah.
And it kind of depends on the situation. If I'm like an hour away from home, I'm not going to leave set for an hour.
Yeah.
To go get something, and I'll just be like, "Sorry guys, we can't do it unless you want to do it without this item." But there are a few times where I have like run home, or because maybe there's been times that I've forgotten something that I should have remembered, you know? And it's nice when I have someone who can help me, like Lucy, and just send one of us offset to go get stuff.
Definitely.
But unfortunately that's not usually the case on indies.
Do you have before you leave the house, are you meant to be going off a checklist? Like, I know when I leave the house, I do the side pat, back pat. I'm like, okay, keys, phone, wallet, sweet.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm like, okay, like I usually have things like packed into boxes, and I'll be like, okay, make sure I have every little thing for this character, because I usually try to bring a character's whole closet for a day, in case they pull like, hey, we have time for this scene now, let's do it. Because it happens a lot, or they'll just be changing things around. But yeah, I definitely have like my checklist, and I'm like, okay, I got it all. But sometimes I miss things when I'm making the checklist, you know.
For sure. And like from what I can tell, you're a very organized costumer, and the way you run your department is very structured. Do you say that's a testimony from working in the union world as well and seeing what they do, or are you naturally an organized person?
I think it's more of a natural and a trial by fire kind of thing. The first like couple shows I worked on were not super organized and very intense. Being a assistant costume designer. And I think going through those times and having the results of not being organized, seeing those, sort of struck the fear into me that was like, I need to be organized at all times.
Yeah. No, it's so handy and efficient to be organized on the day, especially if like I've been on sets where the costumer hasn't put into rows whose costumes are what, or even like what scene order they're meant to be in, and then seeing the stress of like, oh sweet, we're jumping to this scene, this is the character, and they're given all the information, but the clothes are just strewn everywhere.
Yeah, no, I never want to go like that, because I mean, I understand sometimes you don't have a lot of room. Sometimes maybe you don't have room for a rack, so it's hard to have everything like in your bucket or something like that. But no, I always try to be as organized as possible, have everything divided and worked out for the whole day, which I've just, come to learn from being on various sets, a lot of MOWs, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, organization is key. It's a big part of costuming.
Yes, no, certainly. And let me throw a hypothetical to you. So from everything that I know about union and non-union ADing, the costumer is usually, well, not the costume designer, but a costume maybe assistant, a costume assistant,
Mhm.
would have to walk the cast from their green room or from set back to the green room if it's in the rain with an
Yes.
umbrella. Otherwise, usually it's like a TAD or a third AD. Is that something that you're expected to do in a non-union land as well, or is it something that you've been expected to at least like bring the umbrella? Because sometimes a wide variety of departments might have to bring this umbrella, but it's usually costumes who does it. Is that?
Yeah, it's pretty much always costumes. Definitely even on like non-union sets, I have been expected to have the umbrellas and be the team to hold them, which can be difficult when you're a one-man team. There's like 5 actors, you know. Usually hair and makeup are nice enough to help out because it does also affect them quite a lot. Um, but yeah, pretty much always costumes are expected to have the umbrellas hold them.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and I remember like one thing that always trips me out is when you see an umbrella on in the script.
Mm,
And it's also raining on the day, and you have to like, okay, I'm taking him to set with the umbrella, and now let's swap it out for the real umbrella.
yeah. Right? It's that interesting crossover of yeah, but I guess it's props once it's on camera, it's
Yeah.
props.
Yeah,
So
nice and easy. Actually, speaking of which, how is your relationship with props when it is like from time to time? I'll be on a show where it will be special effects makeup, but the design of the body is partial special effects or even props adding elements onto the wardrobe.
mm,
How's your relationship with those departments and who usually leads the vision on something like that?
mm. I would say you always want to have a good relationship with props. I mean, you always want to have a good relationship with everybody.
Yeah.
Um, that makes you a good anyone in film.
Yeah.
Um, but definitely most of the time the conversations I would say are led by costumes. Because props has a lot to focus on that aren't costume related, you know, and I think they usually make that their priority. At least I originally started out in props, so that's kind of how it would work for us. We wouldn't we would think about things that are costume related, like purses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times you're following costumes lead because they are the ones who are setting the look. So you're basing your choice of a purse off of their costume. You're not being like, I think this would fit the character. You're more so going off the costume, I would say. At least for all the productions I worked as props and what I've done since then being costumes.
Yeah.
It can be interesting too because there's a lot of crossover between props and costumes, a lot of gray area. Um, that can be a little complicated in non-union in the indie world. I've found a lot of times that I end up doing the things that would on a union show or a bigger show normally be props.
Yeah.
Because also a lot of the time on indies you've got sort of your art department who's doing set deck and props, and
Yeah.
they got a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
So like I'm fine being like, oh, I'll take over the helmets and the purses or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, you definitely want to keep that relationship good with them and that communication open at all times for any adjustments, you know.
I think it would also be very beneficial for budget because if you're in communication and you're like, don't worry, man, I got the hat this time.
Mhm.
And they come back to you and they're like, but I already bought the hat.
Yeah.
That can be a problem with budget. So I get it. It's definitely one of those things that it's more beneficial to have that great relationship. And being part of this film family, you should be having a good relationship with everyone.
Mhm.
Which is also why, like, especially on set, you guys are being so as efficient as you are and having that opportunity to make changes, which makes you so pleasant to be around on set.
I'm glad.
So I did have a dying question about your relationship with the art department. From what everything that I picked up from film, I know that the costume designer is the head of department for wardrobe and costumes, right?
Mhm.
But the production designer, are they your boss or are they on the same level? And how does it work with the design element comes into play?
Mhm. It definitely, yeah, it depends on the show. For a lot of indie productions I've done, I would say most of the time they don't really consider themselves my boss. They consider me kind of like a separate thing because we don't technically fall under the art department,
Right.
which is kind of surprising because it is like a visual thing. So you'd think it would be kind of grouped together.
Yeah.
But it really depends on the art director and production designer. Because some of them are very involved with costumes and they want to see your color scheme. They want to see the cuts. They want to see what you're going for and be like, yeah, this fits or just doesn't fit.
Yeah.
Some of them are just like, we'll exchange notes on what color this wall is going to be so you don't make it the same color.
Yeah.
And that's kind of more the side that I've run into, I think, in indie, is they've got so much to think about already that a lot of the times they're not too involved with.
Yeah.
The design process definitely differs on union. I would say it's a lot more communication depending on the show. If it's like a modern day contemporary piece, I think a lot of the time they're not super invested in the style. They'll worry about colors and stuff, but not super every aspect. Whereas if it's like a built from the ground up kind of show, you've really got to be in communication. Make sure if it's like a fantasy world, make sure everything fits together.
Got you. Okay, so it's sort of like, I guess in a way, at the simplest form, they might just have their breakdown and share with you their breakdown. So it's more so clashing doesn't happen, not as really, hey, not as them being that director who would be like, this is the type of pants I want, these are the socks, and if the socks don't match the arm bracelet, then we don't want it.
Yeah, exactly.
Got you. Have you ever run into an instance where the production designer was being too forceful on your department?
Not really. Most of the people, I've been extremely lucky in who I've worked with in non-union. To work with like a lot of amazing people. And I'd say sometimes like they'll have opinions and sometimes maybe I'll grumble a little bit like, I don't agree with this, but okay. But most of the time, like they are very respectful of bouncing ideas off each other. And if I'm very strongly leaning towards one thing, they'll at least consider it, and most of the time I would say go with that aspect unless it's something they're very against for some reason.
Yeah.
So I haven't really clashed heads much.
Nice. Well, that's very fortunate.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, we're actually getting to the halfway point, so we're going to quickly take a 5-minute break here. Awesome. And we're back to this side of the episode with Madeline Leigh. So, question for you. And I know because I know you personally, you have won an award for costume design. How do you win that award? What went into going to win that award?
Well,
what was the award for?
It was a Leo Award for costume design for short film.
Okay.
It was very exciting. Honestly, I was absolutely shocked that I won it.
Why? You put a lot of work into your design.
I do.
Yeah.
And I was really happy with it was for a short film called Cafe Racer. That was about a young Japanese woman sort of who was very into cafe racing, which is like you put a song on and you have to race around a certain area before the song ends on
like in a
motorcycle.
Oh, okay. Cool.
And it was a really fun one. It was one that was like, I think one of the things that helped is it had a bit higher of a budget than a lot of the other things I've done. And like a good amount of prep time on that one too. It was still hectic. I remember the nights before shooting, sitting on the floor, trying not to cry, trying to get these helmets trying to black out the helmet's visor. Yeah. But I think it was one that I just had like a good amount of time and money on, which really helped. And the producer and director were also great. They were like very open to my ideas and let me kind of not like just do what I want, but like gave me direction, but also let me have creativity in it.
Yeah.
And I got to work with one of my roommates who helped me do the illustration for one of the backs of the jackets that I was really excited about. It was like this bunny Oni thing. Um, and yeah, I think I can't like nail down exactly why I've
Yeah.
won, but I think that stuff definitely helped a lot.
Got you. Would you say that also an added bonus was that they gave you more reign to create your own style for it?
Yeah, I think definitely they sort of let me take it in a way I wanted to go, um, which was very nice of them. Very, very good to work with them. Um, Especially like the main character, we kind of wanted to go originally a bit cyberpunky.
Yeah.
The budget didn't allow us to go like fully into that, but they definitely let me go with that sort of style, which was fun. And was also fun comparing her to the other characters who were like a little more not basic, but like everyday kind of casual wear. And I think getting to have that character who got to be a little more stylistic, I think also helped towards the awards, just to show something that's a little different.
Yeah. When you have an idea for a character in your script and you're like, I really need them to look like this, but you don't end up having enough budget.
Hmm.
Do you find yourself having to change your story structure for what you visioned the character as and then explaining it back to the director because you don't have enough money? Or do you usually just go up to the director or the producer and saying, I need this much more money and these are the reasons why? What tends to happen when you hit that situation that you can't afford to create the character you wanted or they wanted?
Usually, if it's like a thing of like I just don't have the money to get that exact style I want, it means compromising and sort of pulling back on the design a little bit and trying to make it work with what I can do in the budget. If it's like a thing like we need a cop costume and we don't have the budget, then I definitely go and I'm like, we need more money. Like I can't, when it's a uniform or something like that, you can't just sort of pass it off.
Yeah.
It has to look how it has to look.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, you do have to in the indie world kind of compromise a lot because of budget. But sometimes that pushes you to actually get really cool things because you do a lot of thrifting for indies, and you can find some of the coolest pieces thrifting. So sometimes it ends up opening a different door, maybe taking you in a different direction, but sometimes you end up liking it better.
Got you. And I think something that might be like really important for people watching this who want to get into costume design, budgeting.
Mm.
So the head of department is usually responsible for pulling together their own department or at least looking over their department's budget. Is that something that happens in the non-union indie world, or is it are you just given it? How do you process budgeting on the shoots that you've had to do budgeting?
Yeah, it definitely is a big part of the job. Um, in the indie world, you don't really get to go like, here's how much I think I would need to do this. It is usually the producer coming to me like, here's how much you have.
Yeah.
And it is sort of trying to adapt your designs to work within those parameters. Um, it can be tough, but a lot of the time you'll get your budget before you really start on the initial designs, so you can sort of take it with a grain of salt how far you want to go, which helps to not get a director's expectations too high. If you like present something and then you're like, actually, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got you. And in your physical budget itself, the production designer we had on mentioned that they do it scene by scene, what they need in it. Is yours character by character and then background by background, or how does your budget physically look?
It's usually, by character, and then within that by day. Because usually you have one look a day. Sometimes it's more than one look a day. Sometimes you got like two or three, but you kind of break down by each outfit and sort of go by which every item that you need within that outfit and go from there.
Cool. And speaking of days, where do you find the day? How do you know? Do you get it from reading the script?
Generally, I will go through and I will do my own breakdown of what I think the days are.
Yep.
And then I will go to the AD and be like, what do you think the days are? And we'll sort of compare notes. A lot of the time it's pretty similar. Sometimes there's some differences I don't see.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll have to double check with the director on what they are picturing for each thing. Just because it can be, I was on a show and I think there was maybe like 23 script days or something like that. And I had a breakdown, the AD had a breakdown, and the director had a breakdown, and they were all different.
Yes.
So it's kind of a lot of talking and figuring out.
No, that's actually really funny because I have had a similar experience where it was a 25-day story date thing, but it had so many flashbacks in it. And then trying to work out like, oh, well, technically they go to a new day, but this day is still with 3 days ago. So that's the same day. It was like eagle-eye story terms where it was going from like one person's perspective to another. My structure for it, because I always have it on the one-liner, which day it's meant to be, but I will always go back to the script supervisor. And the script supervisor also has their own breakdown that they do. So I try to correlate with them because they're always talking with the writer to find out what day it is. Sometimes I don't do that, but I try doing it as much as I can because not everyone has the time to do their own breakdowns. But that's interesting because I was always curious about, like, do you guys just go off on your own and you're like, well, this is probably the day that it is?
For the start, yeah.
For me, I'm like, is anyone looking at my documents?
I always look at your documents, Carl.
Thank you. Even if you don't, it's nice to hear. All right. Okay, so we're reaching the segment that we like to talk about a little bit of mental health. And because there's a lot of departments in this industry, and in those departments, a lot of people have to put in a lot of hours and deal with a lot of mental health issues that may or may not arise from being on sets for so long. Is there anything that you notice, and it can be the same as other departments, but is there anything that you particularly notice in the costume department that you have to deal with more than you would think another department would have to deal?
I think everyone in film has a lot of aspects that can bring on mental health issues. I think one thing that can be like a stressor that maybe is a bit different than other departments is the sort of last minute things you have to do, the last minute crunch time, which everyone has, but on a lot of shows, you're not getting cast till very last minute, unfortunately, on non-union and sort of MOW world. Sometimes you get the cast like 2 days before you're shooting, that kind of thing. And suddenly those 2 days turn into absolute panic.
Yeah.
Like, you're doing your best, but you're working usually over your 12 hours. I mean, you can only do so much shopping because malls close, but you're trying to get everything organized at the same time, and it kind of can kickstart a spiral, if you're not mentally doing well during those.
Is there something that you do to brace yourself for those days?
Definitely just trying to prepare as much as possible. Like, if you don't have cast, sometimes buying stuff that you can return, if you can like guess at a size, that kind of thing. Just trying to keep in constant contact with everybody to let them know, like, I'm doing my best, but you guys haven't given me this thing, so I can't physically do this yet. So I will do the best with the time I have, but just keeping everyone aware of where you're at.
Yeah, definitely. Setting their expectations. So
yeah,
if it does ever happen that, like, oh, well, I wasn't able to get this exact piece that you wanted, but also you gave me the guy yesterday.
Yeah. And kind of like you were saying with the blood incident, like, I immediately came up to you and was like, Carl, this might not come out. And I'd rather tell you the worst case scenario and then have it come out like after half an hour or whatever of scrubbing than be like, yeah, don't worry about it. I'll have this ready to go in like 5 minutes, you know? I don't want to put that stress on myself and give you something that's not reality.
Yeah,
You know?
especially because they'll keep checking up and you're like, hey, 5 minutes, you said 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Perfect. No, that's definitely something that I think a lot of departments need to do to succeed in this industry. It's having that constant communication with one another I mean, it's to alleviate a lot of stress and just to let everyone know what's happening. The more they know, the less they need to know. No, that's not the saying. But the more they know, then the less they'll question about why things are happening.
Yeah.
And it sets the expectations on them. How do you manage it in your team? Is there has there ever been moments that you've noticed that someone in your team hasn't been doing so well? And what do you usually do? How do you operate whilst you're in the thick of things?
I definitely try to keep, again, very open communication with the teams I work with. When I'm the designer, usually that's pretty easy because I'm usually working with like friends or people that I'm close with and worked with a lot. On other shows, sometimes it can be harder if you don't know the team as well to be as open.
Yep.
But like, for example, on one of my first shows, I remember our sets, I was assistant costume designer. Our set super came in and immediately in the morning was like, guys, this is going to be a rough day for me. I ran over my cat this morning. Yeah. And we were all kind of like, you shouldn't even be here. Like, that's horrible. And I think it kind of speaks to how much people can just try to push through it for film.
Yeah.
And like just be expected to sort of like keep moving on for the production, which I don't think is a good thing at all.
No.
Like, yeah.
No, definitely, because that mental stress that you will add to yourself on that day could be weeks of healing later.
Yeah.
They're just trying to do it for one day of the shoot,
Mm-hmm.
which in a way I can potentially see being in a higher position on a union set, because if they have to leave, maybe they're thinking, well, this is adding so much more work to my team, so I'm negatively impacting them, or I'm bringing in someone to replace me for the day, and this person hasn't seen anything that we've done, don't know how we operate, which could entail more workload again for the team, or I could suck it up and be there for the day, which isn't healthy for that individual.
Yeah.
If something like that happens on your set, what would you do? If you knew the person, let's say they were under you.
If I knew something was going on with that person, my first instinct would be like, I will do my best to find somebody to replace you for the day. I will take the time to retrain them on what's going on. Like, take the day.
Yeah.
Don't be stressed about things that ultimately don't matter.
Yeah.
What we do is not saving the world. It's not helping people, in a big way. I mean, sure. Films help people like see different aspects of themselves and all that stuff, but we're not solving world hunger.
No.
You being on offset for one day so that you can process what's going on in your life should be more important in my mind.
Yeah. No, 100%. One thing that's like it's a constant reminder in my head, and I try to tell other departments when they're getting more stressed out, and potentially if we don't make a day, I just always say, like, at the end of the day, the film always gets made.
Yeah.
No matter what, the film always gets made. Like, you don't never notice the potential. I mean, maybe filmmakers will notice the shot that didn't make it to camera, but normal viewers never see that. So it's not worth going through this mental gymnastics afterwards for, again, it would have been one day off, resetting your inner mental health and like aligning yourself again, focusing on like what happened and then moving on with it. Because like, I'm not sure what day this was, but if it was like a Monday and then they're not going to have time to process it until the Saturday.
Yeah.
If they're gonna keep going to work. And so how long is a costumer's day usually? Because we always operate on the thought that 12-hour days, right? But I'm sure that depending on the circumstances, you need to work extra hours. What's your average day look like?
I would say about maybe 14 to 15 hours. It depends on who you are.
Yeah.
Like for a lot of people are like, yeah, 12-hour days, because that's when the camera wraps.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, your truck supervisor has to be there like half an hour to an hour before your actors come in.
Yeah.
To steam everything, get the lineup set up for the day. They are then there for like an hour plus after you wrap, because they have to do laundry and get everything prepped for the next day. So it's not as simple as, yeah, the camera's not rolling.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, like, I don't know, I've been on some rough sets. I remember one where I think we did like 32 hours straight or something. We had to like blow up a mattress in the back of the costume truck and take turns napping, because it was such a intense time just getting everything ready. It was a very rough show. But yeah, they're long days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's actually interesting. You bring up a very interesting point. We always say it's 12-hour days. I think there's maybe only 3 departments,
Yeah.
and not everyone in that department is even on the 12s. It might be very few people stick to that 12-hour day, because even with like ADs, the third AD for the circus is there before anyone else in circus arrives, usually, to check everyone in. And then they have to wait for everyone's like DTRs from the day afterwards. So they're always on like 15-hour days.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting that we try to say that film in BC is 12 hours, or we're locked to a 12-hour camera day, which is true, but everyone's doing way, way more hours. But it's good that like in those situations that your team has that structure of like, well, we'll try to get in the odd nap where we can.
Yeah, try and like help people out when you know everyone's getting overworked. Try to like do it in shifts if you can, that kind of thing. It definitely helps. But yeah, it can be, there is some very long days. And I think people sometimes think, because even in prep, there's a lot of long days. I think people sometimes think that, oh, they're just out shopping and stuff, so it's not tiring, and it's like they'll be done when the mall closes. But it's like, no, gotta go back, gotta unpack everything, maybe gotta do some alterations, maybe you have some fittings, like, because fittings too, like actors' schedules can be all over the place.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. So sometimes you're there at like 9 o'clock at night trying to fit somebody, you know?
Yeah, and that must be extremely difficult on a non-union or an indie project where they don't really have the capability to pay people for prep hours, as opposed to like they just give you a flat fee for the most part for prep.
Yeah.
And then you're always the person who has to be available for the fitting, so you're working on everyone else's schedule, which must be difficult to maintain for like your work-life balance. How do you deal with your work-life balance? Do you have a good one?
Probably not very well. I mean, yeah, when I'm working on a show, I'm usually pretty dead at all times, you know.
No.
Even on the weekends, it's mostly about sleeping for me. I try and maintain like going out with friends and stuff on the weekends when I can. I know some people in film are like, yeah, I'll go out on a Friday night after shooting, but I can't. I just like to sleep. Like
I was editing one of my Ryan's podcasts for Creative Conversations, and he had an ALM on that was saying in the peak of things, she would go out in the morning and do a hike at like 5 a.m. before going to work. And I was like, you're insane.
Yeah.
Like, good job. That's very healthy. But how?
I could never do that. Like, oh, man.
I see a Saturday coming. I'm like, that's 14 hours sleep right there.
Yeah. Exactly.
So if there's one thing that you want to strive to do better next year, for more in terms of your mental health, what would that thing be, and what are you going to try to achieve for next year?
I think like as film is sort of starting back up again more now that the strikes are over, I definitely want to try and find more of a balance. I know this is union, but I know a lot of talk right now in the costume department is about doing, I don't know the word for it, but split shifts.
Yes.
Like someone gets 2 days, someone gets 3 days, kind of that kind of thing, so that more people get work. But that also does help in terms of giving people more breaks. I think I know, I guess 2 years ago now or something, I was on a show for about 8 months that pretty much everybody in the department that I was in had to take a very long break after the show because it was a very intense show, a very long show. And a lot of people feel like it's not okay to ask for part-time work.
Yeah.
A lot of the time you will get passed over if you ask for part-time work.
Definitely.
Or if you ask to do 10-hour days, you know? And I think it would be better for everyone if more people were willing to take people on for that, you know?
Yeah. No, exactly. Especially like being a head of department, you can see that if my team's being like, I can run it 100% for 10 hours, and then you're sacrificing like 2 hours of your day that they might not be doing that great, and then they don't have enough time to recharge for that next 10-hour day.
Yeah. And like you're dead at the end of your day. You're not ready for the next day. Whereas if you're doing the 10 hours, then you have maybe some time to go home and watch a show or read or make dinner. And all of a sudden you're like recharging that battery and you can come back and you can work so much harder.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've heard Toronto does well in Canada. They try to stick to more of a 10-hour day type of deal.
That's nice.
Which is incredibly refreshing to hear. Apparently BC is one of the only ones that have such long days.
Oh, man.
I don't know what we're doing, but but okay, awesome. So a little bit more structure for your day-wise within your whole department.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for next year.
Yeah, try to see if I can like balance it out more. Maybe do some 10 hours. Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to check this time next year. I'm going to check in. We'll see how you're doing. But that's an awesome thing to strive to do. And even to put the thought out there for anyone listening today, like, okay, this is something that I can ask for, and it does happen from time to time. So I think the more voices that we have asking for that, the more likelihood that unions are or producers are to hear our voices and bring that to fruition. Cool. All right. Question time.
Okay.
Are you ready? These are random questions that friends of the pod, family of the pod have sent in to ask what is a costume designer or things they want to know from a costume designer, the costume designer. So, do you prefer working with a director who grants you complete freedom due to their uncertainty, or one with a clear vision who may be more selective?
Yeah, we kind of talked about this earlier a bit too.
We did.
I said like in the middle.
This is from a director.
Okay. But I think like if I had to choose.
Yeah.
I think maybe someone who has less of a vision, who gives you a bit more creative control.
Got you. Have you ever been on this happens a lot in commercials, that they don't have a vision, but everything that you choose is wrong?
Oh, yeah.
How do you navigate that?
That's always hard. You kind of just have to keep throwing pictures at them. Like, go on Pinterest, find some pictures, and before you go, like, reshop everything, be like, what do you think of this? What do you think of this?
Yeah.
And find something almost exactly like that in the end. It can be very hard.
Yeah.
That's something that happens a lot on MOWs with producers who just, they don't know what they want, but it's not that.
No. I can tell you everything I hate.
Yeah.
I can't tell you anything that I like. Cool. Okay, so it's throwing pictures at them, and I like to, it's very bad to think this way, but I like to think it's like looking after a little kid, where it's like, oh, you don't like that one? What about this one? No, not that one. What about this one?
Yeah. And it is like a kid almost, where you have to like think about how you speak to them and how you pitch things.
Yes.
Because if you're like, oh, I'm not really sure about this one, but what do you think about it? They're going to be like, no. But if you're like, look at this. This has a great shape, a great color, and all this, like really, you got to sell it. You know?
Okay, so at the heart of hearts, you're still a seller when, especially when it comes to someone who doesn't know what they want, because they see that excitement on your face, like, yeah, this is the best shirt I could find. This is so good. It's gonna make them pop. It's really gonna sell your show.
Yeah, and sometimes they don't want to break your heart if they think you're really invested in it.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, that's handy information. What is your preferred size team? I guess let's talk about it in the non-union sense of things.
Mm.
Like, if you had the budget, how many people would you preferably want?
I mean, it really depends on the type of show. For like a, say, like MOW sized show, like you're doing a feature, it's contemporary. I would say you want to have designer, assistant costume designer. You got to have set super, truck, uh, at least one background costumer, usually like 1 to 3 background costumers, depending on the size of how many background you're gonna have. If you can have a prep costumer, that's always so nice.
Yeah.
And then at least one shopper. If you can have 2, that's awesome. So what am I at? That was like
I think you're at like 9.
8 or 9 people
Yeah.
is kind of like an ideal, I think, size for that kind of show.
Yep.
If it's more of like a build show, definitely more. I think I did a build show that was union 2 years ago. That I don't know exactly what our department was at, but I think maybe like 50 to 60 people.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because it was like we had to have a whole sewing department. You have to have departments within your department. You got to have a sewing department. You got to have like an armor department, a breakdown department. So yeah, on a bigger show like that, the more the better. I mean, it always is like that, pretty much. The more hands you can have, the less work, you know?
Definitely. And being able to communicate in that department would be
Yes.
huge. Like, sometimes the way I think about it, if you're bringing on someone who doesn't potentially know what they're doing, it might not be the best fit for a situation, even if you're just asking for extra hands.
Yeah,
Because
for
then
sure.
you're adding more uncertainty to the situation. But that's good to know. Like, anywhere up to 60, because when I was working in the health and safety department, I would randomly say like I think it would be they labeled it as stylist coming in, like a suit stylist or something like that, to come in specifically for someone's look.
For tailoring.
Yeah, okay. It probably would have been for tailoring. Yeah,
Mhm.
we'd have this. They wouldn't regularly come in. It would be like once every 2 months for a certain costume they would come in.
Maybe doing repairs or something on that one as well.
Could be. I wouldn't be able to tell you. I just saw the name, got their nose swabbed. Do you work closely with the producers usually, or do you have any interaction with the producers?
Yeah, I work pretty closely with the producers on most productions. Um, because their opinion is one of the ones that really matter, you know? I mean, everyone's opinion matters, but they're one of the ones that you have to sell stuff to, you know? The producer director team, usually I try and present to both of them at the same time.
Yeah.
Whether that be like fitting photos or that be like in our preliminary meetings, I try to have them both there.
Yeah.
It's always nice to have both of them around because sometimes they can have clashing ideas, and it's always a toss-up of whose opinion matters more, director or producer, you know? So you want to kind of, and you don't want to be the go-between between them. It's nice to have them in the same space so you can be like, okay, let's compromise here. Who
Definitely.
wins?
Yeah, because otherwise there might be much back and forth if you get them one-on-one.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense because they also give you the budget and they tell you there's also different types of producers. There's the creative producer and then the logistical producers. But interesting. What is your preferred style if you had a choice?
I don't know if it's really style. My preferred, like, what show I'd love to do is I'd love to do more fantasy and sci-fi. Because I'm a huge nerd, and that's the stuff I, like, really love. I don't get a lot of chances to do it because in the non-union indie world, there's not a lot of budget.
No.
And it is usually things that require a bit of budget. Other than that, though, like, if you want more, like, style of... I also enjoy historical costuming a lot. It's just fun to get to do all the research, and a lot of the outfits are like a lot more interesting than what we wear nowadays sometimes, you know? Otherwise, just like very stylized stuff I like to do.
So it really is a testimony of that you really enjoy the design process of it and the creation.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, what is... Oh, no, I just said that one. Who is your biggest influence as a designer, or do you even have one? Are you your influence? You look in the mirror and you're like, it's me.
Me. There we go. No, I think like I take a lot of inspiration from other designers I've worked with, whether that be in union or non-union, usually as an assistant costume designer. I definitely take a lot of influence from how, not just style, but from how they run their teams. One of my biggest influences, I guess, would be Nicole Swan, who I've worked with a lot, and she's
Yes.
amazing. She's such a nice person and so talented. And just, yeah, the people around me, and influences, I guess, like, I don't have, like, a specific designer that I'm like, "Oh,"
Yes.
you know?
This is the bee's knees of the
Yeah.
costume.
Or a specific, like, brand, like Chanel or anything like that. I think for me, my biggest influence is just being out on the street and seeing what other people are wearing.
Yes, it's the whole people watching.
Yeah.
I used to love doing that as an actor.
Mm.
Because, yeah, you don't get any more real than watching, like, just being out on the street, because no one's trying to hide themselves while they're
Yeah.
walking for the most part.
Mhm.
Is there any legality in costume designs? Like, you can't use certain works?
Yes, for sure. It's a lot of the time it comes down to graphics or brands. If you have like a graphic on a shirt, even if it's just a picture of something that isn't like a necessarily like a trademark, like a Disney thing or something like that, just the design does belong to somebody. So you do have to go through the legal team to make sure that it is free use or that you have permission from the artist. And you definitely, yeah, you got to look out for trademark stuff. Like, Disney's kind of one of the big ones. You can't have like a Mickey Mouse shirt unless they go to the mouse and ask the mouse.
Yeah.
But I think he can be a little tough to get
He
approvals
can.
from.
Yes, yeah, definitely. For a company that's so large,
Yes.
it's very hard to get in contact with them.
Yeah.
How does it work when you Greek out a logo?
It depends on like if it's background or a primary actor. With BG, a lot of the time we're just using gaff tape, to like black or white to sort of cover up. A lot of the time it's shoes, Nike, Adidas. They're the big guys. And just kind of covering up those logos. Sometimes it's even just breaking up the logo, because if it's just part of the logo, it's okay. Then with like main actors, usually you have to find a way. If they got like a little polo shirt with the little horse and everything, you can like stitch rip that little guy out, or you can try and find a little design thing you can put there, just to hide it.
Badges.
Pins, badges.
Perfect. The little design flares.
Yeah.
Okay, and then lastly, if someone wanted to get into the costume department, how would you recommend getting into it, knowing everything you know now?
Hard question, because there's so many different ways to get into costuming. I think definitely if you can have some sewing knowledge, that's useful. It's definitely not required, but just having that little bit of knowledge, it can give you a leg up. And I think, like, just keep trying. Find out, like, send your emails to production companies, whatever. Be like, who's your designer? And get in contact with them. Like, a lot of designers are very open to taking on new people. We always need extra hands. If you're willing to, volunteering on like indie projects as well is definitely a really good way to like build up your resume and get a foot in the door. You make so many connections doing non-union and indie that can help you further on in union and everything. And a lot of the time, people on those sets are willing to train you more, because it's a learning environment for a lot of people, and the stakes are a lot lower, which is nice.
Yes. Yeah, especially even if, like, I don't know, even if they did have a bad experience on set, you kind of learn a lot of knowledge just about how sets are operated as well. Like, you might be the best designer, but if you've never been on a set, you don't really know the times that they need you to operate in and how fast. So it's great to get that experience on set, and I agree. In the indie world, it's a lot easier to make a mistake, and people are a lot more lenient in the indie land rather than union when they expect you to already come in knowing a lot of this information.
Yeah.
Sure. Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have for today. But if we want to find you, where can we find you? Instagrams, emails, tell us.
Instagram is at Madeline Costumes. That's probably the best way to get in contact with me, honestly. I check those messages a lot.
Perfect. And do you have a website or something that you want us to showcase for you?
I don't actually yet. I need to build one.
Okay, perfect. Well, usually at the very end of this, I'll ask, what piece of work do you like the most that you've done that I can add a little snippet at the very end? Do you have a portfolio or something?
Yeah, I've got some portfolio pieces. One of my favorites is the one we just did, which I don't know if we can actually share.
We can definitely. I have an in with the producers. Let me talk to them. But yeah, let me talk to them. We'll see if we can add it to the very end of this, or we'll work something so we can showcase your work at the end so that they can reach out to you in the future for getting Madeline Leigh, the infamous costume designer of the indie world.
I could also give you some Cafe Racer stuff if you want.
Yeah,
that's
the Leo Award winning.
That's
yeah,
probably a good one, I guess.
And it's been seen. No, that'd be great. Anything that you want it to be seen, we can put at the end of this. But thank you so much for coming on to our show today, for sharing your experiences as a costume designer, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Well, That's a wrap.